Good afternoon. This is RCB News, and I am Ryan Bowling. We're going to continue and conclude our discussion of the 10 myths of the United States of America's Constitution. So we have 4 more to go, and these are very, very interesting. And I think you will be enlightened by them. Myth number 7. Prayer was legally banned from schools. Prayer was legally banned from schools. Now listen to this. Originally, the states were empowered to set their own rules on religion, not Congress. So prior to this situation, states had the right, and I believe some of them still do, the right to determine whether or not they wanted religion and prayer in their schools. It goes on to say, in 1962, the Supreme Court transformed that state role into a federal role by banning prayer and Bible study in all public schools. So the idea that prayer was legally banned from schools is a myth. That's a state function, not a federal function. Myth number 8. The Bill of Rights lists our human rights. The Bill of Rights lists our human rights. It says every human right existed before the Constitution. Now, before I read further into this, let me just say something about this reality of every human right existed before the Constitution. The Declaration of Independence specifically states that our rights, our unalienable rights, come from God. Now, whether a person believes in God or not is null and void. Many of the founders and framers of the Constitution believed in God or believed in some kind of divine deity. And because of that belief in this divine deity, however way you want to interpret him or her, or whatever way you want to put it, I believe it was a him, so that we're not going to get into that. This God, this divine being, gave us our human rights, inalienable human rights that cannot be argued with. And if God gave us our rights, then by contrast, the government didn't give us our rights. Therefore, if the government didn't give us our rights, then they cannot take our rights because our rights are given to us by who? God. Therefore, by right, the government cannot take our rights. That's one of the things that makes the Constitution of the United States unique among all other constitutions all over the world. One of the things that makes the Constitution of the United States unique is the fact that our rights come from God. Therefore, no human government can take them away from us. They're trying to, but they can't actually do that or should not be doing that. Okay? Now, let's go further. The Bill of Rights is not an exhaustive list of all rights, but does list several specific human rights the government may not abuse or abolish. This is very important because the Bill of Rights is not an exhaustive list of all rights, but does list several specific human rights the government may not abuse or abolish. And that's true. Now, let me say this right up front. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights, although they are separate documents, they're united and connected to each other. All right. So the Bill of Rights is connected to the Constitution. The Constitution connected to the Bill of Rights. The Constitution basically supplies and empowers the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is basically additions, amendments, or additions to the Constitution. They stem from the freedom based on the Constitution. Therefore, they're connected together. So they're inseparable. So therefore, the Bill of Rights is not an exhaustive list of all rights, but does list several specific human rights the government may not abuse or abolish. So they're tied together. So therefore, our Bill of Rights, even though they're not all the rights that humans possess, there are enough to at least lay the foundation that we've been given these rights by God, and therefore these rights cannot be taken from us. We have the right to worship who we want to worship, when we want to worship, where we want to worship, why we want to worship. We have the right to free speech. We have the right to own a gun and protect ourselves. These are rights given to us by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, clearly. But these are our rights given to us by God, really, because as it says in the Declaration of Independence, these are inevitable rights given to us. Therefore, they cannot be taken from us. And in order for us to defend them, we need to know them. Okay. Myth number 10. It's a hodgepodge of compromises. It's a whole bunch of compromises. And I'm going to read this and I'm going to explain this. There are only 3 main compromises. Slavery could continue for 20 years if the South would join the Union. The federal government could regulate interstate trade, and state representation would include representatives based on population and 2 senators per state. All other issues were debated and passed by majority vote. Okay. Now, here is something that I find interesting here on the first one about slavery could continue for 20 years if the South would join the Union. This is one of the compromises. Now, a lot of people, in order to demonize Abraham Lincoln, who was a Republican, in order to demonize him and say that he was for slavery, they say that the only reason why he did what he did was, allowed them to come in because he wanted to create the Union. It wasn't about him wanting to free the slaves. Okay. It was all about the Union, all about the Union, all about the Union. But if you read a little bit deeper into that, he had to make that compromise because he understood that in order to defeat slavery in the South, which was the region that upheld the most slaves, and they were Democrats, by the way, that was a predominantly Democratic held area. In order to defeat slavery, he had to compromise and allow the southern states to join the Union because he had a view towards destroying the concept of slavery in the future. And that's what ended up happening. So he allowed them, he compromised and allowed them to come in. See, what people don't understand about this compromise, Abraham Lincoln understood, had he not allowed those states, them southern states, to become a part of the Union, okay, that withheld slavery and allowed slavery to continue for 20 years afterwards, had he not allowed them to come into the Union, guess what? Right now, we would still have southern states that have slaves. Is that what you want? In politics, you always have to compromise, unfortunately, because it's politics. It's not a matter of compromising right and wrong. You have to. It's politics because you're trying to meet the needs of different factions of people who may have different viewpoints and different worldviews and different opinions. But you need to get their vote. And so in order to get their vote, you have to compromise in order to get things done. And in this instance, Abraham Lincoln compromised with these southern states and allowed them to come in. But he had a view towards defeating them. In order to defeat them, he had to gain enough leverage in order to do that. And that's what he did. But he also understood, as I said earlier, that had he not allowed these southern states to come into the Union, then we would still have slavery right now in the southern states. Now, I'm pretty sure most black people that's watching the video wouldn't want that to happen. So stop demonizing the man, okay? Thank God for him. If it wasn't for him, we'd still be slaves. Chill out, all right? So that's that for that. And then and I also wanted to say too about this idea, this myth that it's a hodgepodge of compromise. When people say, well, the Constitution it was a whole bunch of compromising. When people say that, especially if it's politicians, liberal politicians, the reason why I believe they say that is because that weakens the Constitution. Because if it's a whole bunch of compromises, because as this myth names only 3 of them, if it was a whole bunch of compromises, then that would mean that the Constitution is weak and you can change it and flip it around whenever you wanted to fit your ideology. So when you hear this idea that it's a hodgepodge of compromises, that's not true. It only names these compromises here, and there was a reason for that. Everything else, all the other issues were debated and passed by majority vote. So there you go. And the final myth number 10, federal government controls the states. The idea that the federal government controls the states is a myth. Listen what it says. The states must obey every congressional law, listen to this, that does not violate the Constitution. If a new law is unconstitutional, the states are free to disregard it without waiting on the Supreme Court's examination. And man, oh man, that's what we have going on right now. Now, I can only say so many things about this, but the mandates and so forth from Biden administration, number one, there is no congressional law that was created concerning this mandate. But not only that, Many of the states consider it unconstitutional, and Florida is one of them. DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is pushing back. And I think it's at least 26 states that are pushing back against this. And they're not waiting on the Supreme Court to rule to examine it. And they don't have to. That's a myth. Because they believe this to be unconstitutional. It is not supported by the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that states that this should be mandated on all the people in America. And you know what I'm talking about. Nothing in the Constitution. So the government, the federal government does not, what does it say? Federal government does not control the states. The only way that the state should submit to a congressional law is if it does not violate the Constitution. But if it violates the Constitution, which this clearly does, then they have a right to disregard it, and they don't have to wait on the Supreme Court. So that's what we see right now. See, the truth is the truth that will set you free, not a lie. A lie binds you. It's the truth that will set you free. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this 3-part series on the 10 myths of the Constitution of the United States of America. If you have any comments, please leave your comments in the comment section below. If you like this video, press the like button, share this video, and subscribe. God bless you all, and see you again on RCB News.